happened? Some kind of genetic engineering?
A viral mutation?
We do not discuss it with outsiders.
The Klingons are one of Star Trek's most well-known species, and in most Star Trek series, they're immediately recognizable for the distinctive ridges on their foreheads and noses. But despite these ridges being the Klingons' defining physical trait across most of Star Trek, the Klingons didn't always have them. In the original series, the Klingons were ridgeless, and overall, they looked more human. There was actually a story behind this, one that the Klingons themselves considered taboo, and which they did not discuss with outsiders. But we're not Klingon, so we can discuss it all we want. So in this video, we'll be telling you the story of how the Klingons lost their ridges. Well, some of them. Welcome to Trek Central, I'm Captain Jack. If you want to keep up to date on the latest Star Trek news, lore and more, then make sure to hit that subscribe button to never miss a video from the team here at Trek Central. And we're enjoying making these Star Trek videos, and we really need your support to keep making them. So if you want to keep Trek Central alive and kicking and running at Warp 9 but not 9.9, then consider becoming a patron using the link down below. You can support our video development and get some fantastic exclusive rewards. This includes dedicated interviews with the Star Trek legends, custom events like book clubs because who doesn't love a Star Trek book, and more Galaxy class rewards. Check out our Patreon links below, and if you have any questions, ask me in the comments. As always, please do let me know your thoughts in the comment section below about this video, because if you're talking about Star Trek, then we want to hear about it. Okay, engage. Now, as Mr. Worf said, the tale of how the Klingons lost their ridges is a long story, and it actually begins on Earth in the early to mid 21st century. Through genetic engineering, a group of Eugenics created a human subspecies with greatly enhanced intelligence and physical capabilities. These Augments had super capabilities to ordinary humans in pretty much every way, but they were also extremely belligerent, ambitious, and immoral, believing they were superior beings, and that this superiority gave them the right to do whatever they wanted. Using their enhanced abilities, the Augments seized power in more than 40 countries, establishing brutal dictatorships and treating their subjects as slaves. This sparked a 4-year period of turmoil and bloodshed known as the Eugenics Wars, which ended with the overthrow of Augments, albeit at a great cost. Following the end of the war, the nations of Earth and the United Earth government that succeeded them banned genetic engineering research, and the remaining Augment embryos were put into cold storage aboard Cold Station 12. A century later, in the 2130s, the senior medical director of Cold Station 12, Eric Soong, stole some of the embryos and went rogue. He hid it on Trialis 4, where he raised the Augments as his own children. Soong believed that the Eugenics Wars hadn't been caused by genetic engineering technology, but by humanity's inability to use it properly, and he sought to prove that the Augments wouldn't necessarily turn out to be ruthless dictators. 10 years after Soong's theft of the embryos, Earth Starfleet caught up with him, and Eric Soong was apprehended. The Augments, however, were nowhere to be found by the time Starfleet got to the planet, and Soong refused to say where they had gone. The mystery remained unsolved for over a decade, until Soong's children returned. In 2154, 2 of Soong's Augments were able to commandeer a shuttle and escape the planet, ultimately winding up in the borderland between the Orion Syndicate and the Klingon Empire. There, they picked up a Klingon bird of prey, whose crew took the Augments prisoner, but not for long. The Augments soon escaped, killed the entire Klingon crew and spaced their bodies, and then they picked up the rest of their brethren from the original planet. The Augments claimed the bird of prey for their own and used it to travel the galaxy. The Klingons, meanwhile, recovered the corpses of the ship's crew and discovered human DNA on them. They threatened war with United Earth, believing that Starfleet had stolen their ship, and Enterprise NX-1 was dispatched to capture the rogue Augments and cool the rising tensions with the Klingons. Captain Archer attempted to get Eric Soong to help him bring the Augments in, but the Augments instead abducted Soong from the Enterprise and escaped again. On Soong's orders, the Augments stormed Cold Station 12 and recovered the remaining Augment embryos there. Soong wanted to raise the Augments in peace on a remote world in Klingon space, but he soon found himself at odds with his children, who wanted to start a war between Earth and the Klingon Empire to prevent Starfleet from coming after them again. To that end, they planned to unleash biogenic weapons on the Klingon colony of Qovat. Fortunately, Enterprise intervened in time to stop this genocidal attack. Enterprise shot down the Augment's biogenic weapons, and despite taking heavy damage in the ensuing skirmish with their bird of prey, was able to cripple the Augment ship as well. Rather than surrender, the Augments destroyed their own ship, killing themselves and taking the embryos with them. Following this battle, the Klingons agreed not to retaliate against Earth over the affair in gratitude for Enterprise's help at Qovat, as Starfleet believed that the threat of the Augments had been dealt with. Unbeknownst to Starfleet, however, the Klingons discovered a few surviving Augment embryos amidst the wreckage of the bird of prey over the planet. After examining them, the Klingons realized they had been genetically engineered, and not knowing the full story of Earth's eugenic wars, they believed that the embryos were part of a modern-day eugenics experiment. The Klingon researchers feared that Starfleet would use these augmented humans to crew their starships, and that the Klingon Empire would be no match for such an augment crewed fleet. Hoping to safeguard the Empire against such a possibility, the Klingon science team decided to develop their own augments, splicing the DNA of Klingon warriors with DNA from the embryos. As the scientists hoped, this led to those Klingons developing enhanced strength and intelligence, but it also had a number of side effects. For one, it caused the enhanced Klingons to take on other human traits. Their forehead ridges dissolved, and their personality became more human. Ultimately, DNA incompatibility led to the deaths of all the Klingon test subjects, and this first Klingon augmentation experiment ended in failure. Despite this, because of course they would, the Klingons kept experimenting, attempting to stabilize the augmentation process. The science team continued to augment test subjects, and one of those test subjects happened to be sick with Levoidian flu. This virus that caused the flu hybridized with augment DNA, and what had previously been a controlled experiment became an epidemic. The Klingon augment virus spread rapidly, augmenting all the Klingons who were infected by it, and since the augmentation process was still fatal at this point, this posed a grave threat to the entire Klingon species. Within mere months, millions of Klingons were infected by the augment virus, and entire colonies were overtaken by the disease. In a panic, the Klingon High Council decided to start sterilizing infected worlds to control the spread of disease. This plan was stopped at the 11th hour after Klingon scientists, with the help of Denoblian Dr. Phlox, found a way to stabilize the virus. This treatment stopped the progression of the disease in its early stages, after the infected Klingons had lost their ridges and experienced personality changes, before it developed enhanced abilities and became contagious. Since the development of the enhanced abilities were ultimately what killed the Klingon augment test subjects, this left those infected with the disease able to survive. At the urging of Admiral Krell, the Klingon High Council called off its sterilization plans and began distributing the cure to all affected Klingon colonies, averting disaster and allowing most of the Klingons infected with the augment virus to survive. This did come at a cost. The millions of Klingons that had previously been infected were now permanently disfigured, and their personalities were permanently affected as well, making them more human-like and less belligerent. Additionally, since these changes were brought on to changes in the affected Klingons' DNA, these disfigured Klingons would make up a significant portion of a population for generations to come. In the immediate aftermath of the crisis, many of the smooth-faced Klingons feared that their disfigurements would make them outcasts among unaffected Klingons, and that they would lose their positions within the Klingon Empire. It's unclear whether or not these predictions were right. On the one hand, at the time of the Klingon Federation War in the 2250s, all known Klingons in positions of power, including the High Council members and many prominent military commanders, had forehead ridges, suggesting that Klingons that were not affected by the augment virus had a monopoly on power in the Klingon Empire at the time. But in the 2260s, just a decade later, many ships in the Klingon fleet were crewed and even captained by smooth-faced Klingons, and at least some affected Klingons were honoured as heroes of the Empire. It is possible that Klingons with ridges dominated Klingon society, but the smooth-faced Klingons were still allowed into some positions of power, and it's also possible that things changed in the Klingon Empire in the decade after the War of the Federation. Regardless, smooth-faced Klingons, at the very least, predominant in the Klingons' interactions with the Federation in the 2260s. In keeping with their more human personalities, these Klingons were less overtly aggressive and honour-bound than most Klingons we know, and they often oversaw campaigns of espionage and manipulation against the Federation, using tactics that most Klingons would consider less honourable than a straightforward fight. Nonetheless, the smooth-faced Klingons' time in the spotlight was short. By the 2270s, Klingons of ridges were predominant yet again, and by the late 24th century, ridgeless Klingons were unheard of, and few outside the Klingon Empire even knew they existed. In canon, it's unclear whether the smooth-faced Klingons eventually died out, were marginalised, or whether their human traits were simply bred out of the gene pool. Star Trek Online, however, does provide an explanation for this sudden shift. In the 2270s, the Klingon scientist, Hergom, developed a retrovirus that removed the augment virus DNA from some affected Klingons, restoring their full Klingon personalities and physiology. Hergom developed another retrovirus soon after, which cured those Klingons that had been immune to the first, thus restoring ridges to all ridgeless Klingons in the Empire. This second cure, as it turned out, was created with the DNA of the Klingon-human hybrid Muriel Paris, who had been briefly kidnapped and brought back to the 23rd century. Through these time travel shenanigans, the last trace of the augment virus was swept away, and the Klingons, embarrassed by that particular chapter of their history, did their best to forget the whole affair. So that's the story of how some Klingons lost their ridges in the Star Trek universe. Like always, if you want to keep up to date on the latest Star Trek news, lore, and more, then make sure to hit that subscribe button to never miss a video from the team here at Trek Central. You can follow us on social media or join our community Discord server. A big thank you to everyone who supports us on Patreon. Your support allows us to continue making these Galaxy-class videos. For now, I've been Captain Jack, thanks for watching, and we'll see you next time. Live long and prosper, my friends. Goodbye.